like to welcome everybody to our services today. Part of the City of New Bedford Veterans Day observance. We are also calling attention to the fact that it's the centennial anniversary of the ending of World War I, which tomorrow at 11 a.m. of the 11th month, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day, was when World War I ceased. There was just an armistice. The war actually ended several years later when the peace treaties were all signed. But as part of the services that are ongoing throughout the state and the country, we here for the Veterans Advisory Board wanted to call attention to one of the only monument in the city that is dedicated to World War I, particularly to a unit that was 100% raised here in the city of all New Bedford men. 22 of those men did not return home. Several of them are still buried in France. So it's very fitting that we use centennial observance to be here at this memorial and to invite and have the descendant organization, the 101st Field Artillery, here present with us, who descend from these men who went overseas in 1917, 1918. To begin our service today, I'd like to call up our Tori Kalitz, our Miss New Bedford Outstanding Teen 2018, for the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you sing every dance early? It's so proudly held at the 12th last greeting, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight over the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets like glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, so does that star-spangled banner over the lands of the free and the dream of the world.
Thank you, Tori. Probably it's one of the difficult renditions to do on a day like today with this wind. I just want to introduce several of the organizations that are represented today. We have the DAV Chapter 7, the Marine Corps League, VFW Post 6643 from Freetown, American Legion Post 1, the Howland Chapter National Guard Artillery veterans who've done a tremendous job in making sure this square was put in and rededicated a few years ago, as well as the AMVETS Post 62 that are represented here today. I'd like to call forward Mayor John Mitchell to provide an address to us today for the ending of World War I.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it. I might, if you guys raise your hand if this gets too difficult with the wind, and is it already too difficult with the wind? Let's see how we can do it, and then I'll do it the old-fashioned way, the way they did it back in 1918. That's without amplification. So, we're here today to pay homage not only to those who served in the First World War, and also to mark the armistice, the 100th anniversary of the armistice, but also to, in particular, pay homage to the soldiers from New Bedford who served in Battery D in the 101st Artillery Regiment of the 26th Yankee Division. I'm so glad. I just want to say right up front, I'm just thrilled that we're having this event today because this was a unit that saw a tremendous amount of action and was derived from entirely from New Bedford, as Bob noted, and it's a big part of this city's history that I think doesn't get nearly enough attention. And I wanted to just thank everybody up front who was part of the organizing of the event. Bob, of course, and the VAB, Chris Gomes, of course, our Director of Veteran Services for the city. I know that Jim Dussault, is Jim here today? I don't know if, I know Jim Dussault, whose law office is right there. His father, Romy Dussault, was a sailor on the USS Bunker Hill when it went down in the Pacific. Jim has always been a very big supporter of all veterans events and commemorating occasions like this. I want to thank all the elected officials who have come today in support. Newly elected State Representative Chris Hendricks, City Council President Linda Morad. I thank all of you for being here today. And of course, I want to thank the commander, today's commander of the 101st Artillery Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Fiorentino. Thank you for being here today, sir. We really appreciate the presence, and we appreciate you bringing out the howitzers and the vehicles because I think it adds a really certain touch to the event. We appreciate the extra work that you put into it. And as someone who is a former fire support officer in the 101st, I especially am grateful that you've made your presence felt today. So thank you very much. We do commemorate the work, the sacrifice, the commitment of those young soldiers in Battery D, and I think it's just to gain a little bit of perspective to think about when New Bedford was 100 years ago. Think about that time. This city was a very, very dense place, a population that was about 25% greater than it is today, and about half the space. There really were few people who lived south of Hazelwood Park or north of Brook Pond Park, or even west of Buntwood Park. It was a very, very dense place with large immigrant families for the most part, and you had a lot of folks in this city, including members of my own family who were immigrated and then deployed during that period, who raised their hand when President Wilson and Congress called in 1917 and got into it at a time when the United States really didn't have much of a regular army at that point, and so they joined for the most part existing National Guard units like the 101st, whose lineage goes all the way back to the very beginnings of colonial America. And a lot of these guys were, in many cases, were raising their hand to go fight against countries their families had come from just within the previous 20 years or so. And so they didn't know what they were getting into. They weren't well trained, but they knew that America was a special place that their families had come to, and that they had pledged their undying devotion to. And so at the time, Battery D was housed at the Armory on Sycamore Street, and it was quite a large, the entire 101st was there. I think the headquarters battery was also there as well. And so they signed up and they deployed in late 1917, which was fairly early among all the units that were deployed over there, American units that were deployed over there, and they trained up in France, and then they got right into the action and were part of many of the major campaigns in the war, including the Meuse-Argonne campaign, which was the real big push at the end. The American push at the end had eventually forced the Germans to succumb 100 years ago tomorrow. But one thing to understand about the field artillery at the time, and Colonel, I know you can elaborate on this for sure, is that in the First World War, the artillery was where the action was. Because because transportation and communication technology hadn't caught up with firepower technology. There was a war of competing artillery units in many respects. And so what the guys whose names are on this tablet behind me were, and many of them fell to what was then called counter battery fire, still is called counter battery fire today, where they just were exchanging volleys with enemy units over a long period of time. And it's just, if you think about, you know, that kind of combat, it was dirty, it was nasty, it was awful, and these guys stuck with it, and they played on to the end of the game, right up until Armistice Day. And so the city at the time, when they returned, erected this monument a few years later.
You know, as we look back over the last few years and the current wars we've had, we have a number of veterans from the most recent wars here. We have veterans today from really every war going back to World War II. Don Canto's here today. That we know that their sacrifice counts more when we say, we don't forget you, we haven't forgotten you, and we will do everything that we will discharge our responsibility as citizens of the United States to make your sacrifice count, and paying it back and serving however it is, however we can, whether it's in the military or some other way, in public service, because we know that's what every veteran from every previous war would want from us. We'll see you out in the parade tomorrow, but thank you very much for coming by today. We really appreciate it.
Even with adverse weather conditions here, we can still get the event going. At this time, I'd like to call up our keynote speaker for today, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Buratino, who's the battalion commander of the 101st Field Artillery Regiment of Massachusetts Army National Guard. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. Well, my thunder was stolen, but we still have some thunder back there. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to speak today. Thank you to the City of New Bedford and the New Bedford Veterans Advisory Board for having me. A special thanks to Mayor John Mitchell, Chris Gomes, Mr. Robert Bromley, City Council President Linda Morad, Tori Kalitz, the outstanding Miss New Bedford for 2018, former Commander 101st Field Artillery, Brigadier General Mass Retired B.H. McLeod, State Rep Chris Hendrick, and Representative Tony Cabral. It's my pleasure to be here. Tomorrow, we honor the service of all veterans, those military personnel who have served and sacrificed much, some everything, for this great nation of ours. On the 11th day of the 11th month, at the 11th hour, major hostilities formally ended the Great War when the armistice with Germany went into effect in 1918. World War I, thought at the time to be the war to end all wars, was finally over. The city of New Bedford is uniquely steeped in military history and tradition. Many residents of this city played a vital role in the Great War. Today, in ceremony, we gather to mark the centennial anniversary of the famed 26th Yankee Division and to honor those soldiers from Battery D, 102nd Field Artillery Regiment, who fought and sacrificed so much to defeat tyranny in Europe. The Doughboy statue here behind me in Artillery Square bears the name of 22 New Bedfordians who died in the effort of world freedom. Members of Battery D, these patriots were part of the Field Artillery Regiment that trained in the Army, located on the corner of Sycamore and Pleasant Streets. New Bedford is an artillery city. In 1904, the Army opened and housed artillery units of the Massachusetts National Guard for 99 years. Most recently, prior to closing in 2003, it housed the headquarters and headquarters battery of the 1st Battalion, 101st Field Artillery Regiment, the battalion I currently command. New Bedford, to say it the least, has been a gracious host of the King of Battle. Artillery is known as the King of Battle because of the lethality it brings to the battlefield. In fact, artillery was the largest single killer in World War I. In May 1917, Massachusetts ordered a 2nd Regiment be organized from new and existing units. Battery D would be part of that organization. From May to July of that year, the unit opened the armory in New Bedford every single day, enlisting recruits that included at least 8 sets of brothers at the time. Battery D would be comprised of 199 personnel, 5 officers, and 194 enlisted men. Ordered to active duty on 25 July 1917, their training was very basic. They were issued uniforms, but no howitzers or other equipment. By October, a mere 120 days or so from inception, Battery D of the 2nd Battalion, 102nd Field Artillery Regiment, 51st Artillery Brigade, 26th Yankee Division would arrive in France. They would be issued 75mm howitzers as displayed here in Artillery Square behind me, and be trained on them for the next 14 weeks. Think about that for a minute. A military unit, an artillery unit, recruited, built from scratch, and mobilized in roughly 120 days. The patriotism of this city and the will to sacrifice to keep freedom alive was undeniable. The 75mm howitzer displayed on this square, dedicated to those 22 men who sacrificed everything, was considered the first modern artillery piece. With a range of 5 miles, it could fire 15 rounds per minute. The soldiers of Battery D, like the statute shows here, were so proficient that they could load and fire 4 rounds in 6 seconds. So fast for the time that it is said German prisoners of war would ask to see the quick fire guns, thinking Americans had some kind of new weapon system. The 102nd Regiment fired 14,000 rounds in a 24-hour period, a U.S. record of the war, with Battery D firing 2,300 of them. On 16 June 1918, the battery would help repel a German raid due to their accurate and timely fires. Battery D would see constant action right up to the 11th of November. As such, the unit was awarded 5 Silver Stars, or Croix de Guerre, for valorous actions. On 29 April 1919, Battery D would be inactivated. Total casualties would include 22 deceased and 41 wounded in action. A parade in Boston recognizing Battery D and the famed 26th Yankee Division's return home would see 20,000 soldiers march and more than 1 million spectators. A crowd only duplicated 85 years later when the Red Sox of 2004 won the World Series. A very close ancestor to Battery D and common tenant in the Armory on Sycamore Street, the 1st Battalion, 101st Field Artillery Regiment, is the oldest regiment in the Army, with lineage dating all the way back to 1636. The battalion colors we have here today have 62 streamers, some from World War I, sharing the same battle space as Battery D. Today, it is only fitting that our A battery bring 2 of the battalion's 18 howitzers for display. The larger gun is a M777, 155mm caliber, and has a range of approximately 25 miles. The smaller howitzer, the M119 Alpha III, is 105mm caliber with a range of 12 miles. Both systems are loaded similarly to the 75mm gun behind me. Basically, a steel round propelled by powder. While these howitzers are not representative per se of Battery D, the Field Artillery Branch, the Brotherhood, and now the Sisterhood, as well as the lineage and historical significance of the units, are tied tightly together by the Massachusetts Army National Guard, the 51st Brigade, the 26th Yankee Division, and especially the city of New Bedford. Along with the Doughboy Soldier and Cannon on this common, you'll also see tributes to the current active battalion and 101st Field Artillery Regiment. As we acknowledge Veterans Day and reflect on 100 years of freedom in Europe and the 100th anniversary of the end of the Great War, we also reflect and thank those in uniform, active, retired, no longer with us, who served and worked hard every day to ensure freedom rings loudly. This weekend, in this city particularly, we pay tribute to Battery D of the 102nd Field Artillery Regiment and the 22 soldiers memorialized here. Personally, I would ask that we remember Sergeant Michael Kelly from Scituate, who died in Shkin, Afghanistan on 8 June 2005, and Sergeant Robert Barrett from Fall River, who died 19 April 2010 near Kabul, Afghanistan. Both of these heroes were members of the 101st Field Artillery, the South Regiment, when they were killed in action. I don the Indian head pictured on the granite memorials in this common as my regimental crest over my right pocket of my uniform. It bears the motto, Vencer est vivere, which means to conquer is to live. A fitting motto in reference to any war, but specifically for the Field Artillery. From Coastal Artillery to Battery D to the 211th Field Artillery, and today the 1st Battalion 101st Field Artillery, South Regiment, New Bedford has gone out of its way showing support for the Field Artillery. The city has done a superb job recognizing and remembering the Field Artillery community, displaying decades upon decades of history and traditions. From stone hurlers to modern day howitzers, New Bedford has made our branch proud. You know, Army Combat Chief Historian Samuel Lyman Atwood Marshall may have said it best when trying to capture the pride of the gunner. Quote, "Artillerymen have a love for their guns, which is perhaps stronger than the feeling of any soldier for his weapon or any equipment." He was right, and I'm certain the men of Battery D felt the same way. Thank you for having our unit here today. Please enjoy and reflect this Veterans Day. To the guns.
Once again, it's the infamous button. Colonel, thank you for your words. It's greatly appreciated here. I'd like to call forward Sandra Quatros Bowles for the reading of In Flanders Field.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from hailing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
At this time, we will be having our honors presentation to the 22 men of the of Battery D 102nd Field Artillery. We have 22 red carnations. We like to have volunteers to come up and to each receive a carnation. And as I read the name of the man who did not return, if you could place the carnations to the front of the memorial. The carnations are right here with Peter Clark. Robert H. Andrews, Henry H. Brown, Kenneth W. Chase, Solomon Cohen, Alfred A. Collins, Albert J. Craw, Stephen B. Dayhill, Armin Daigle, John H. Dickey, George Higginson, Edward Hurst, James L. Kelly, Nestor Labonte Jr., George Landry, Austin G. Lenning, Branscombe Lloyd, Thomas W. Moore, Amity Poirier, Frederick W. Richardson, William Whiting, Charles N. Scott, and B. Chester Smithhurst. Mayor Mitchell, Lieutenant Colonel, if you could please retrieve the wreath. The tradition that I'd like to bring forward again is one that was created by the veterans, and it is the placement of a wreath, the laurel, and a rose. And we've forgotten what the meanings are to them. Placing a wreath is a tribute and symbol of remembrance that may our citizens never forget your sacrifice. The rose was placed by veterans as a symbol of purity, so that may future generations emulate the unselfish devotion to their duty. And the laurel is the symbol of their victory. This concludes our services today here at Battery D Square, the National Guard Square. We'd like to thank everybody who participated, particularly the speakers, as well as the 101st Field Artillery for the exhibit of their artillery pieces. We'd also like to invite everyone across the street to Waldron Barracks, where we have coffee and some refreshments and pastries there for everybody to enjoy. Tomorrow, the parade starts at 11 a.m. If you're in the parade, please be there by 10:30. Immediately following the parade will be services in front of the main line road on Bedford and William Street. Thank you.